there was internal strife within Afghanistan at the time that the Soviets used as a pretext to invade. Prior to the president at the time, there used to be a king of Afghanistan, and he was overthrown by the communists, the local communists within Afghanistan. A communist government in power in Afghanistan at that time. It was relatively new, relatively weak. It was unpopular. When there was local resistance and they were about to topple, they asked the Soviets to help bail them out. The Soviets were sympathetic to that, and they used that as an opportunity to invade. The Afghans themselves were mixed. There were some that were sympathetic to the communists in power, but the majority, I think, at that time were opposed, obviously, and viewed it as a invasion. And then it very quickly became a religious war in many ways. Afghanistan was an Islamic country, and so the local Afghans, who themselves were very fractured, they united against the Soviets, who they viewed as atheistic infidels.
The Afghans were Muslims, believing in Islam. And it's hard for a godless country to go into a country that believed in traditions and try to take over that country. The Afghan people did not like the Soviets because they didn't believe in any theology. They were godless people. So they fought them.
I was in college at the time, and most of America was outraged at the Soviet invasion. It came very much as a surprise. Most Americans were very upset and outraged by it. From what I remember, Jimmy Carter's response initially was to withhold the United States from the 1980 Olympics, which is a big disappointment.
Yeah, clandestine sort of support for the Afghan resistance. And everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but people in general seem to support that, if they even knew about it.
America was preoccupied by a number of events. I think the Soviets took advantage of that America introspection and took the opportunity to invade Afghanistan. The Soviets made a calculated risk that we wouldn't react militarily, and they were correct. We didn't take military action at the time, but there were covert things going on that most people didn't know about. The CIA started aligning with the Pakistanis who were on the border, with the Afghanis who had fled to the Pakistan border, and they started arming them.
They formed a fighting outfit called the Mujahideen, and the Mujahideen fought along with American support, British support, French support, fought the Soviets, and eventually pushed them out of Afghanistan. The Soviets came in with the idea that they were all powerful, that they would crush this guerrilla movement. But they didn't understand. They weren't going to fight an army. It's not an army that you were fighting. It was guerrillas.
What they called the Mujahideen, who came from all over the Islamic world and allied themselves in the Pakistani side of the border and essentially engaged in a emerging guerrilla war. And so I think the war lasted nearly a decade, 9 years or so. And over that time, the Mujahideen and the Afghanis and the Pakistanis and the CIA and it's really Islamic fighters from all over the world slowly bled the Soviets to death.
After the war, the Soviets moved back out. Afghanistan was left in some chaos, and that led directly to the eventual rise of the Taliban and our troubles there today.
The mindset I get in my mind after the war was Soviet tanks rolling back into Russia, a defeated army, and the Mujahideen fighting them all along the way until they crossed into Russia. The Soviets were defeated in Afghanistan. They vowed to never go back because that was a war that they just couldn't win. The economy couldn't support this war. They had spent so much money on defense and no returns until the Russian people were just sour with it. With the collapse of the economy, they couldn't sustain what they were doing. They were defeated, and they had no alternative but to remove their troops from Afghanistan and start repairing their society.